Very warm welcome to Pembury Baptist Church. Special warm welcome to anybody who's travelled. Who's travelled? I mean, everyone's travelled, but some of you are Pembury, but really warm welcome. Isn't it a lovely day? Such a wonderful day to have this time to celebrate a wonderful man. We're live streaming, and if anyone's watching online, you are part of us too. Very warm welcome to you too. Now, has everybody here got access or see one of these orders of service? We'll follow on with everything that's happening in this. And if you're all sat at home, I know it was put on Facebook, the order of service, so you might be able to download it and follow along that way. My name's Dan. I'm the pastor of the church here, and it's an absolute honour to welcome you here for this day, this opportunity. It's been a long time coming, and we finally have the chance to get together to celebrate this wonderful man, Brian. Brian was a member of the church here. He was also an elder here. And you know, one of the very simple things he would always love to do was stand on the door and welcome people in, and people were so blessed by that, and we love Brian, and we're so grateful to God for this man of God. So we have, at the moment, we're having a sort of you can sing but keep masks on kind of policy, but do sing, please do sing, as we're going to sing in a moment. Now, if anyone needs the loo, we have an outside, no. You have to walk across the courtyard. We do have toilets, but walk across the courtyard and there's a door out there if anyone needs to go to the loo. And there is a cream tea afterwards to which everybody is invited. In case I forget to mention this at the end, I'll mention it right now. It's on 36 Henwood Green Road, which is that way. If you find yourself in a building site, you've gone too far. It's next door at the building site. It's Alistair and Helen's house, and it's an Oast house. So everyone is invited to come along. I'll try and remember to mention that at the end, but otherwise mentioning it now. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. You and I, we are loved by God. And Brian was a man who knew the love of God. And we're going to sing, "O love that will not let me go. I rest my weary soul in thee. I give thee back the life I owe, that in thy ocean depths its flow may richer, fuller be." Let's stand and sing praises to the God of love.
We sing together, "O love that wilt not let me go." O love that wilt not let me go, I rest my weary soul in thee. I give thee back the life I owe, that in thine ocean depths its flow may richer, fuller be. O light that followest my way, I yield my flickering torch to thee. My heart restores its borrowed way, that in thy sunshine's blaze its day may brighter, fairer be. O joy that seekest me through pain, I cannot close my heart to thee. I trace the rainbow through the rain. up my head. I dare not ask to fly from thee. I lay in life's dust glory dead, and from the ground there blossoms red. Life that shall endless be.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's lovely to be here with you. Doesn't feel like very long ago at all that I was standing here and we were talking about Penny and how beautiful and brilliant that woman was. I don't know how you feel as you gather in this place. There's something about having a memorial service right after somebody's died that feels the right way to do it. But the kind of enforced 18 months that we've had to wait until this point maybe is not a bad thing. Maybe we've had a chance to really sit and appreciate. And we come here, of course, in sadness. We wish Brian was still here. But also, perhaps that time has been a good time to reflect just what it is that we've lost and just how much we miss him and just how much we love him. Brian has an incredible legacy. There aren't many men of his age who, not just in this room, but people watching online, but perhaps even more significantly, the ripples of Brian's life have cast their way across thousands of people's lives who love and appreciate Brian and Penny. And so we're going to hear some of those memories today. He has this incredible legacy of his early years, of him and Penny, these stories that he would often tell about leading youth groups and weekends away. Apparently he did some a couple of years ago. But he loved that time in his life, and there was a whole group of people. They had this incredible gift of hospitality, and that was a whole other group of people who just felt loved in their presence, as well as Brian's ministry through church that touched the lives of so many people as well. And I feel so privileged to be asked to just play a little part today. When I met Becky, I thought life doesn't get better, and having the gift of a wife like Becky is an incredible thing, but to also to be joining in a family like this family is a privilege that I can't tell you how grateful I am to have. I miss Brian and Penny very much. We're going to hear from Brian and Penny's 4 children as they share some memories with us.
Afternoon. So, I'm not actually going to share memories. I'm going to talk about... So when I was sort of sitting down and thinking about what I was going to say today, I kind of came down to a phrase that we coined, I think at the funeral, which was to be more Brian. And it kind of made me think, like, who was Dad and what was Dad to me? And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to sort of focus on what he gave me and how that has become, I guess, part of me. So, I think the first thing that really strikes me is the word love. And the first thing that came, into my mind was the word love. It was love to his wife, it was love to his family, to his friends, but it was love that was not just shown, it was love that was lived. It was love that was exemplified in his relationships with people within the family and outside of the family. It was love that opened the doors of our family home on many occasions to all those who needed a place to either be, to come, to be counselled, to stay, and to be loved. And it was love that supported and nurtured. And whether that be previous employees, whether that be friends, family, it was consistent, and it was something that always shone through. And one little example of this was when I was in Eastbourne, and we didn't often go out in Eastbourne when we were kids, but when I was 18 we went to Eastbourne for the first time. I was in a bar in Eastbourne, and I was talking to this guy at the bar, and as it transpired, he was a former employee of Dad, and he worked at Bushy Mead Press, and he said that Dad, in his in a real troubled time for him, had offered him some money to get through that period, and it meant so much to this guy. This guy was just gushing, and it was, you know, amazing that even in that environment where I'm somewhere new, Dad's love kind of shone through, and so that was the first thing that I thought. I think, secondly, was how balanced and calm he is, or he was. You know, he was rarely frustrated, rarely flustered. He very rarely got angry. In fact, his default response was always balanced and calm. I think listening mode was more often employed than lecturing mode, and that led to someone whose empathy shone through, his ability to see an argument from the other side, you know, really kind of shone through and made a real difference to me. It kind of taught me that that's how I should be approaching things. And that's sometimes frustrating because I sometimes see things more from the other person's side than maybe from my own, which can be a bit of, but it's an amazing facet that Dad had. The third thing that came to mind was his resilience and his strength. You know, when I was a child, he was going through some of his most challenging times, not least the loss of the business. But throughout this time, whilst I think I saw things happening, I was never particularly aware, never felt the stress of that. He always had a way of dealing with things within some boundaries, and it didn't filter out. And so as a child, looking back, and maybe I've blocked it out, but looking back, I think, you know, I really respect the way he was able to do that, because I'm not able to do that in the same way. I know I'm not. And it's a real strength of his. I think then in latter life, building the new life in Pembury, getting part of the community, becoming the elder here, you know, in his 70s, and eventually losing Mum, you know, throughout it all, his strength and his resilience shone through. And then lastly, but definitely not least, his positivity. I think that's something that a lot of us have spoken about, and his positivity in situations that you know, all of the rest of us would be having a great whinge, a great moan. He would kind of be there, finding the positive, finding the silver lining. He never spoke negatively about anyone. Even if he would go out, you know, for a meal out and have a really bad steak, which would be a massive disappointment for him because he loved his steak, he would come back and the first thing he would say was that it was a great night out or it was a great meal. That he wouldn't focus on that negative. And in fact, if he was around someone and they were being overtly negative, he kind of got itchy and would want to move on and would always be encouraging the situation on. So I guess in summing up, those are the sort of the first four things that came in, and I guess the most important things. But, you know, I want to be able to lead my life in the same way. I want to be able to employ the same sort of approach to life and behaviours. And, you know, I would love for someone to be saying the same thing about me at my funeral. And so that's what I'm going to take forward.
Do you like the way we're all colour coordinated? That was not planned. Dad, Chinese burns, play fights, car washing on Saturdays, endless gardening, punching his stomach while he held it taut, hoovering with the Eubank Hoover, bleaching the sink last thing at night, silly accents, the Upside Down Kingdom. Any Mayfield people here? Remember the Upside Down Kingdom? It went on for weeks, didn't it? Oh my goodness, what a great preaching series that was. Listening to my music, teaching me to catch a ball, teaching me to swim, and carving the Sunday roast. All of these are my classic memories that I have of my dad. He was great fun as a dad, and pretty mischievous too, right to the end, and without doubt he was my hero. Don't tell Mum, but I actually found him a lot easier to talk to than I did her. There's got to be some silver linings, haven't there, to this situation we find ourselves in, being able to actually say that out loud. He didn't always know. He didn't always know how to handle his first teenage child, but thankfully their corporate naivety meant that I was able to pull the wool over their eyes on numerous occasions and get away with all sorts. Having said that, not so much stealing cigarettes from their friends, but that's another story. Growing up for us children was a dream. We know how privileged we were. Not just materially, although we were, but having parents who loved us, loved each other, and loved Jesus as much as they did, meant that we had a great foundation from which to learn and build our lives on. Dad definitely chilled out from his early brethren roots. I believe when he and Mum first met, Mum was told she had to wear a hat to church. But thankfully, though, as we got older, he definitely relaxed and enjoyed a good party. He went from teetotal to full-on fanatic of red wine. Yes, this is my heritage. I'm not ashamed. There's nothing like a good Santa Million. And he would invariably hide a wine glass in the cork cupboard that we would find evidence of, you get that wine stain in the bottom of the glass. Invariably, you'd open the cork cupboard door and there'd be an empty wine glass in there at the end of the evening. He was a cheeky bugger. When I look back on his life, I realise what amazing energy and determination Dad had. Not only did he run his own successful business, he pastored Coggins Mill Church. Reflecting on this, I realise how much he taught me about leadership, that it's all about people at the end of the day. If you get that right, you're doing something good. If you're in leadership in this room, value people, that's all that matters. At Bushy Mead, or Bushy Mad, as we like to call it, at Bushy Mead, he'd do walkabouts in the factory every day. He'd get stuck in when needed, never viewing himself too highly to get his hands dirty. And I, for one, used to love sitting on the stitching machine with him and Auntie Viv as we were getting, and the rest of the team, as we were getting Ceramic Review ready to go out on the shelves. Do you remember that, Viv? We'd all be there, all hands to the pump. Dad was passionate about the local church, that it should be a place that showed God's love and a place that made a difference in its community. He loved pastoring the church, and I think, to be honest, he would have loved to have been doing that full time if he had his choice. His heart was ultimately for people, that they would know that they are loved. He was generous with his time and with our home, which was a blessing and a challenge, right up until Alzheimer's robbed him of the ability to have a good conversation. He was interested in talking about the church and how it should be impacting its local community. It was deep-rooted for Dad, and something that I admired in him very much, and continue to do so. Mum and Dad went through a number of troubled years from the mid-90s onwards, due to financial difficulties and having to move out of Yeomans. But what I find remarkable about those difficult years is that our kids knew nothing about them. They did go on for quite many a year. But Dad and Mum were able to put the children, their grandchildren, first. They threw themselves wholeheartedly into being the best grandparents and not allow whatever was troubling them to compromise those relationships. As a consequence, and as you'll see at the end of this service, the children have remarkable, happy memories of their grandparents. The last time I saw Dad was in February 2020. Obviously, I didn't realise that would be the last time that I'd see him, But something very special happened that weekend, and something that I'm now extremely grateful for. I came up here on the Friday, and myself, Helen, and Ali and Nicola took Dad for a day out to Rochester Cathedral to see the moon installation that I believe you've just seen in Durham, haven't you, Dave? It was a really happy day, and Dad, whose mind was gradually dying due to Alzheimer's, was nevertheless able to enjoy our time together. We went for tapas in Rochester, and Dad thought, as we left, that he'd only had his starter. It was quite a confusing meal. The waitress...
He always said that.
Yeah, the waitress was very good and humoured him. We did the cathedral, we saw the moon, and then on the Saturday, the next morning, I went down to the cottage to see Dad, and his carer was making him scrambled eggs on toast. What I noticed was the Alzheimer's had stripped Dad of the ability to relax and know how to be hospitable in his own home. And that was quite difficult. That was quite difficult for us as children, but for him, he just didn't know what to do anymore. But what happened that Saturday was so precious to me. The carer made him his breakfast and he sat down at his dining table to eat it. And I was able to sit with him. We sat there for an hour that day. Little did I know that that would be the last time I'd sit with my dad at the table and just talk, one-on-one. We talked and talked and talked. He mostly talked rubbish. Stories of Ali stealing things from the home.
No, that wasn't rubbish.
And moving things around. But it was so precious. He rarely sat still like that, and definitely didn't in his and what was their home. I think it was too painful for him. But that day he did, and we just chatted, and I had one-on-one time with him again. We never know when our time is up, do we? When the day is done. And losing Dad was a huge shock. It happened so suddenly. And it is so weird being here today, 18 months on, having not really been able to do this prior to this day. But as Dave said, it's given us time to consolidate our thinking and our feeling. So losing Dad was a huge shock, and it happened so suddenly. But actually, it was also God's mercy, and their dear friend Viv said that to us. Dad wouldn't have coped with the pandemic. It would have broken Ali and Helen, I think, having to try and keep him in and trying to work out how he was going to live through that time. But Dad is now at peace, and he's back with Mum, and he's no longer confused, and that's a gift. Obviously, I miss him like crazy and would give anything for another hug. But I can't deny him the joy that he's now experiencing in heaven. He knew what sadness was after losing Mum, but I can hear him saying, as he so often did, "You're big enough and ugly enough to look after yourself." So thanks for that, Dad. Love you to the moon, and thank you for being you.
Well, unlike my other two siblings, I'm unscripted, but thanks, Joe, for nicking in life, yeah. But thanks, Joe, for nicking most of my memories.
Do you want my script?
Yeah, can I? So, I just wanted to say, Dad obviously had a massive impact on my life, from a very early age. But, I suppose really the bits I can talk about that others don't have the same memories is what he did for me personally, in my career. And the fact that, from the age of 16, when I was desperate to be a sound engineer, Dad decided that, I should do an apprenticeship in print. Thanks for that one, Dad. But there weren't any apprenticeships around. I did do some research, and there was nothing. But Dad went off, and in his own way, came back and said, "Look, I've been onto the YTS scheme, BPIF. they've got this scheme, I'm happy to fund you, would you like to do it? You know, and I'm like, well, I've got nothing better to do. So, and it stood me, it stood me in amazing stead. I'm very fortunate that, I'm still in the print, but we've diversified. And, I'm very fortunate I've got, friends that I've been in the print most of my life with here today, but that was from Dad. And I think what I learnt from Dad was how to do business. Dad was very relational. He was, as Joe said, he would do his daily trips around the factory, and if there was a hole that needed plugging, he'd plug it. And much to Phil's sometimes frustration, I tend to do the same, to this day. When I walk around and see that something needs doing. So, but I think, early memories of my childhood would be travelling to France in the Volvo. I obviously not quite the, I suppose I was the oldest child, second oldest child. So I got put in the boot, lying over the suitcases. Whilst Dad was towing a caravan and most of the way doing 90 miles an hour, I think, Robbie, wasn't it? And I just had a great time putting my fingers up at, like that, obviously, at lorry drivers, and smiling, and if they didn't smile back, then it was a slightly different thing. But that was, but we had some fantastic holidays with some fantastic friends, and some of those, again, are here today. So, what Mum and Dad, I think, overall taught us, and taught me is, how to do hospitality, how to be hospitable, and how to love, as Joe and Chris have both said, how to love other people as you, would want to be loved yourself. And I think, that as, that's how I suppose I've lived, try and live my life now. And try and, with our family, we're so fortunate to have a great wider family, and most of that is, because of what, Mum, Dad, Granny, Grandad have shown, us. So, yeah, I think that's all. I don't think I need to say anymore. I think, what they showed, what both Mum and Dad showed us was how to love other people and how to, make people feel welcome. And, I'm very pleased, delighted to invite you all back to our house, afterwards. Please bring a picnic. No, we have done all that. And join us for a cream tea on the drive, and we can share some more memories of Dad and Mum.
It's hard trying to sum up nearly 46 years of knowing someone. We were told 2 minutes. Joe went completely off that. So in less than 2 minutes, but I'm not even going to try. As the last of the four of us to share my reflections on Dad, I'm sure you've already heard about the wonderful, loving, godly, humble man our Dad was. A man so unassuming, with no sense of ego, not wanting to ever be centre stage, but just happy and content to be among family and friends, and so couple that was going on around him. To be the quiet one at the table, listening and enjoying the life that was being lived. This was true even more so in his later years. His world fell apart when he lost Mum exactly 6 years ago today. His soulmate, partner, wife of 48 years, closest ally, and ultimately his fiercest supporter. And then when the cruel diagnosis of dementia was given, he was pulled further into a world he found confusing and where we couldn't reach him. The last few years were tough for all of us as we watched the Dad we knew and loved sinking further into himself. But they were so much harder for him, as we found out after he died, as he lived alone in a world full of anxiety and fear. We were grieving for the Dad we loved while he was still with us. We were slowly losing the man who'd love nothing more than to be surrounded by family and friends, yet who now struggled in social situations and would instead find safety at the kitchen sink, where he wasn't forced to recall a person or an event. His sudden death 18 months ago was such a shock to us all. Right at the very start of the pandemic, he was probably one of the over 120,000 people who lost their life to COVID. It robbed us of a chance to say goodbye. But as it's already been said, it spared him the agony of isolation and has ultimately reunited him with the woman he loved. Dad, I'm so grateful for the love you showed to us all and to so many others, for the family and home you and Mum created, for the inspirational way you plodded through life, loving and teaching others, and faithfully serving the God you so loved right to the very end. I'm so glad of the times we had together after Mum died. I will treasure those memories forever. Cups of tea and cake in the cottage, fish and chips at Knockcuts, walks around Scotney Castle, you cleaning the grout on my bathroom tiles, and of course, tidying up the garden together. This was a time I rarely had growing up in our busy household, so I will always hold on to and cherish these memories. And thank God for you, the man I will always be able to call my dad. After Dad died, a friend wrote a poem and sent it to me, and it's just been incredibly special. It says, although darkness stalks you, I am gone to a better place. I am held now by the ones I missed the most. I laugh, and again I get the joke. I smile and hear every word of what was said. I am sorry that passing cannot be gift-wrapped and it will hurt you. But you must go on, as I know you will, and in doing so, so do I.
Million, and he'll be at the head of the queue to thank Brian for all his good service. We're going to hear a reading now from Brian's sister Viv. It's great to have you here with us, Viv, and Judith and Tony, but we're going to hear from Psalm 63.
I just say my brother was my big brother, but he was also a bully at times and bossy. And I've got other memories of him as a child. But in latter years, yeah, he was a real blessing, and I miss him terribly. Even now, though, I don't have to wander around the pier in Eastbourne in the middle of winter with him. Bless him. But anyway, he's asked, well, you found this psalm, which was very special to him. And I think this is the secret of his life and what was in his heart. This is a Psalm of David when he was in the desert of Judah and he was hiding from his enemies. And he was feeling intensely lonely and longing for a friend he could trust. And I see this as a prayer of David in his desire for God's presence, for God's provision, and for God's protection, who he knew alone could satisfy our deepest needs. Psalm 63. My soul thirsts for you. O God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you, and my soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land where there is no water. So I have looked upon you in the sanctuary, beholding your power and your glory, because your steadfast love is better than life, and my lips will praise you. So I will bless you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift up my hands. My soul will be satisfied as with fat and rich food, and my mouth will praise you with joyful lips when I remember you upon my bed, and I meditate on you in the watches of the night. For you have been my help, and in the shadow of your wings I will sing for joy. My soul clings to you, and your right hand upholds me. But those who seek to destroy my life shall go down into the depths of the earth, and they shall be given over to the power of the sword. They shall be a portion for the jackals. But the king shall rejoice in God, and all who swear by him shall exult, for the mouths of liars will be stopped. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Thank you, Viv. Brian was immensely proud of his children and his grandchildren, and we're going to hear a song from Eve and Grace with Paul as well.
Children, may his presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you and within you. He is with you, he is with you. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations in your family and your children and their children. Their children, may his presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you and within you. He is with you, he is with you in the morning, in the evening, in your coming and your going, in your weeping and rejoicing. He is for you. Amen. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations in your family, in your children, in their children, in their children. May his presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you and within you. He is with you, he is with you in the morning, in the evening, in your coming and your going, in your weeping and rejoicing. He is for you, 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 he is for you. The Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace.
What do we do now? When I saw the order and I had to speak after that, I just thank God every day that he gave those girls their mum's looks and their dad's musical ability, and not the other way round. I think we're all... That was beautiful. Thank you. He would have been so proud. I just got to share a few thoughts with you. I want to keep it short, but Brian really wanted me to speak for a long time. So I'll do my best. We just had a little interment of the Ashes in Mayfield that felt incredibly precious, and those who were there just gathered and shared. I just got people to think about their legacy. It's nice to remember somebody, but it's even more profound to say, what difference will there be in your life because of the life of Brian? Why have we not... Sorry, I don't know how I've made that connection before. Because of Brian's life. What difference will it make? What difference does it make that someone lived a life? And it was just such a profoundly beautiful moment as people one by one just said, this is the difference of knowing Brian and Penny. And I just want to share really a word that has come to mind as I have taken time to sit and pause and be quiet and think about Brian. Of course I'm grateful that I knew Brian. Of course he had a huge impact on my life. But why? And here's the word. It's a word we don't use very often these days. But Brian was devoted. As I thought about all of the things that I knew people would share, was there one word that encapsulated it? And I think the best word might be devoted. The dictionary definition is of loving or loyalty. Brian was certainly that. Given over to the display, study, or discussion of is also what it means to be loyal. Brian was loyal and he was incredibly devoted. But what does it look like? And why did Brian embody it? The thing about Brian, and I've met lots of people in my life in all kinds of different ways, through church stuff and in the places that Becky and I have moved around the country, and I don't think I've ever met anybody who was so good at being with you. For me, that's what devotion looks like. You can tell somebody that you love them, you can buy gifts, you can do things for people, but it's a rare gift where people are able to be with you. Do you know what I'm trying to say? They're not just around you. That's just people who are either extrovert or nosy. Brian wasn't an extrovert in that sense. He was with you in the sense that if you were with him, it felt like you were the only person in a room which may have been crowded with hundreds of others. It felt like there was no place he'd rather be than be with you in that moment. I know lots of people who have incredible gifting and have lots of other talents, But sometimes when you're speaking to them, they're looking for the more interesting person. Maybe that's just me. The more interesting person to speak to. They're looking over your shoulder. They're wondering what's next. Brilliant people at networking, getting business in any kind of situation. Brian was never like that. He was brilliant at being with people. Some people think that the most expressive way of showing love is to do for, and that's not a bad thing. I think that perhaps the reason that Brian and Penny were such a good partnership is that Penny was the one who did for people. She would do anything for you. Brian would be with you. And as we stood around today with people of all kinds of different connections, some have known Brian for a long, long time and others less so, the consistent theme was that he welcomed me. He was with me. We valued Penny because of her knowledge and her hospitality, her memory, her honesty. But I miss Brian because just of his presence. He was brilliant to be with. And there's something that I really think Brian would want you to be reminded of today. How did Brian get that way? If I want to be like that more myself, which I do, how did he get to be that way? The reason that Brian was so good at being with people, I think, was that he had a personal, devotional practice of being with God. Few people I've met in my life who have a genuinely devotional life. In other words, they took time within their rhythm of their day to be with God. It's been mentioned that those last years were difficult with Brian, or difficult for Brian. And one of the things that Ali and Helen felt they needed to do, and rightly so, was to have a camera to make sure that Brian was safe. And I don't know how Brian would feel about this, but what that camera also caught, when he thought nobody was watching, was his personal devotion to God. Time that he set aside to pray and to be with God. He didn't get any credit from anybody else because nobody else knew he was doing it. But that cultivation of being with God created in him a security in himself that meant he could be with others. I have a favourite story, and I'm a preacher, I've got lots of stories, and I often say these are my favourite, but this really is my favourite, and I thought I might have even told this at Penny's memorial, but I don't care, I'm going to tell you again, because I can't think of a better story to describe what Brian's relationship was like with God. The story is told, and I know it's a true story, of a priest who was in America, who one of his relatives died, and he came back to Ireland to be part of the funeral. And this priest had a big church, and a big successful church. And he was coming back for this relative's funeral, but he was desperately looking out for his Uncle Seamus, because he had such fond memories of his Uncle Seamus. There was all other kinds of people to see, but he sought out his Uncle Seamus and said, "Can we go for a walk together? I would love to catch up with you." And here was this elderly guy, as they walked along the sands together, with a spring in his step and a smile on his face, just like he always remembered his Uncle Seamus. And they sat on some rocks, and he turned to his Uncle Seamus and he said, "Can I ask you something that I've always wanted to ask you?" And he said, "Go ahead." He said, "Uncle Seamus, why is it that you always have a smile on your face? Why is it that you know joy that I've never been able to find?" And this guy turned to him and said, "Oh, that's easy. I have a Father in heaven who is awfully fond of me. I have a Father in heaven who is awfully fond of me." Because Brian spent so much time being with God, he learnt what some of us have to de-learn, that God isn't the God who's against us, or angry with us, or disappointed with us, but God is the God who wants to be with you. God is the God who wants to be with us. I know that at a heart level, and I know it theologically, if you want to talk about it afterwards. Anybody? Okay, we'll just have cream tea. But I know it theologically because the most profound thing that God did was he came himself in the incarnation to be with us. There is no more profound thing that God has done, not even the creation of the world, The end of God, his desire, his very purpose is to be with us. And Brian knew that. There's a verse in 1 Corinthians 13, it's often read at weddings, but it finishes by saying, we now know in part, but one day we will fully know, even as we are fully known. Brian knew in part what it was like to be with God. And now he's fully with God. And he would want you to know that even this beautifully devoted man only knew in part what it was like to live in the presence of God. And my belief is that he is fully in the presence of God, in the presence of love, in the presence of acceptance and grace. Revelation chapter 21 says, I heard a loud voice which said, look, the home of God is among his people. He will dwell with them, and as their God, they will be with him, and he himself will be with them. God is with us. I can think of no greater way to remember an individual as somebody who enjoyed being with people because he learnt that from his Heavenly Father in heaven, who enjoyed being with him. Brian, I want to thank you for showing me a better way, for describing a pathway that I would like to be better at myself. Thank you for your devotion to your wife, your devotion to your children, your devotion to your grandchildren, to your friends, to your family. Thank you for your devotion. It's seen, it's appreciated, and we love you today. I'm going to ask Phil and Andy, part of the kind of story, the heritage that we've talked about. Really grateful that you're able to join us, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Am I going first, Andy? Well, you're first on the list. Yeah. I've got to get used to this. Ali, because it's always been Alistair to me, but Ali asked me to say a few words about Brian and his Mayfield years. I'm going to start off by telling you that something happened to me a couple of weeks ago, and a very good friend of mine turned 90. And I sent him a card for his 90th birthday, and on the card I wrote, "Thank you for being such a great influence on my early teenage years." And he was. Today I want to say that Brian was the person who was the greatest influence, maybe beside my wife, but the greatest influence on my life in my 20s and 30s. And we've all heard this today, lots more eloquent people than I am, that he was a great friend, a great mentor, a great encourager over those 20 years. And for that, I owe a great debt for thankfulness to him. I first met Brian and Penny in Kimmeridge. Now, not Kimmeridge in Mayfield, but Kimmeridge in Heathfield. Ali was sitting on Penny's knee. He looked very sweet then. This was, I'm not quite sure how old you are and Joe, but this was, I reckon, in 1973. And Jo was standing by her mum, clinging on to her for all she was worth, when these two strange people wandered in the room, or ushered in the room to meet them. Alistair looked very sweet then, and Jo looked fairly shy then. I think they both changed since then, but that's how they looked to me then. So we met them there. I'd known about them a bit before that. And then when they moved to Mayfield, we were very excited because we lived about 100 metres away from where they lived, just round the corner. On the day they moved in, I thought I'd go and knock on their door. And I think I took some flowers and maybe a bottle of wine, I'm not quite sure. And they let me in. And I was absolutely gobsmacked because the house was so organised. I hadn't believed they'd moved in that afternoon. Everything was in its place. And it was absolutely brilliant. The children were all in bed, only two of them, and Penny was cooking steak. Now, I thought that was class. I really did. I thought that was class. For me, and for quite a lot of people here around the back there, Fridays and Sunday nights at Kimmeridge were the highlights of our week. Now, just imagine this scene. It's a brand new house. They've just moved in. Brand new carpets everywhere. New furniture everywhere. And neighbours that they're trying to get to know. And then suddenly, at about 7:30 on Friday nights, a load of motorbikes would turn up outside. A load of cars would turn up outside. Not quietly in any way. And they'd be let in and welcome. Dirty shoes on carpet. Cups of coffee being drunk. Some spilled as well on the carpet, I'm sure. But it was a highlight. We sang, we prayed, we developed friendships together. Penny was totally unflappable, always welcoming. And Brian teaching from the Bible, we loved those evenings, we really did, and we look forward to them. After Tim, who's at the back there, my son was born in 1975, I think that's right. Liz and I used to take turns in going. And our garden used to come down to nearly to Brian and Penny's garden at the end of it. And I used to go out when I was babysitting Tim, carrying him in my arms, just to listen to the singing, because I was desperate to be there, because I knew that was the place where I was loved, cared for, taught and mentored by Brian. It was a fantastic time, and we longed to be there all the time. So thank you, Brian and Penny. You made those evenings wonderful for us. We spent in the late 70s and early 80s a few years abroad. And by the time we returned to Mayfield, Friday nights and Sunday nights had run their course. Brian was very involved in Coggins Mill and leading Coggins Mill, and it moved into its new home in Station Road. When I came back to it, Brian was playing the keyboard and leading the service, running the church, preaching with great energy and skill, running the business and his family. I admired him. I don't know how he did it all, but he did, and it was wonderful to watch and to be part of. It was a time of great growth in our church, which I thank God for. And Brian cared and nurtured the new Christians with love and skill and energy. Again, there were times spent, by this time they were at Yeoman's, and there were times spent at Yeoman's. I had my spot in Yeoman's where I used to sit. Wednesday night, house group, I loved it. Just as like 10 years before in Kimmeridge, Yeoman's was a place where we were always welcomed, always cared for, always loved. Alistair asked me to tell some funny stories. Well, I'm sorry, Ali. I don't have that many. But what I've tried to tell you of is a man who loved me, cared for me, taught me, built me up in my faith, and for that, I'm eternally grateful.
Hiya, I'm Andy. Again, I knew Penny and Brian. I know this today is a memorial service for Brian, but for me, I only know them as Penny and Brian. They were a unit. Because of circumstances of life, we probably didn't see much of them in the last 20 years, but in the early 70s, they were very pivotal in my life. I'm a farmer. I'd been at sixth form and seen this rather attractive 15-year-old who was in the fourth year. The fourth year. I don't know what that is in new money, but anyway, fourth year. And I later found out that she was part of the youth group at the Union Church in Heathfield, so this was interesting. Time passed, I'd left school, and she was now in the lower sixth, and she was living in a children's home in Heathfield, and I'd assumed she'd probably, when the term ended, because there was no provision in those days for people once they got beyond 16 for paid care, she'd probably go back to her family in London. But to my amazement, Penny and Brian fostered her. So there she was, living in Heathfield, part of the Union Church Youth Fellowship. So I thought that'd be a good place to go. And so it was. Well, in time, we are now grandparents, and we have numerous grandchildren, and actually numerous cattle as well. We've got about 1,000. I think a couple of memories of Brian, particularly. One was on Sat, because Liz was part of Liz was my wife. She was this lovely 15-year-old who's now a little older, and we used to go over there for Sunday dinner, and Brian had this obsession for cleaning the hob. After Sunday lunch, you could always chat to Brian, but he'd be cleaning the hob. And the other thing was when I made my intentions seriously known, because Liz and I were going out for about 4.5 years, and it took me a while to get around to proposing to her, although I was always going to marry her. That was, And I always remember Brian taking me aside and saying, "Do you think you can keep her into the manner to which she's become accustomed?" And I can put my hand on my heart and honestly say no. The poor girl suffered. It's no fun being a dairy farmer's wife, I tell you. As I was thinking around sort of what to say, I kind of, because I haven't got any new memories, I thought, well, what about Penny and Brian today? And I love this extract from C.S. Lewis, The Great Divorce. And in it, we're in a story as the main character is being led to the outskirts of heaven by a guide, and he's just been by a river where it's unimaginably beautiful, giving off such wonderful sound and music that it filled the air. C.S. Lewis has this vision of heaven where the reality that we're stood in today is a mere shadow of the reality we know in the presence of God. Anyway, they're walking through heaven, and the guy says, I asked, is there another river? All down along one side of the forest and under the leafy branches had begun a terrible dance, trembling with dancing light. And on earth I knew nothing like so to produce this appearance as the reflected light cast upwards by moving water. A few moments later I realised my mistake. Some kind of procession was approaching us, and the light came from the persons who composed it. First came bright spirits, not the spirits of men who danced and scattered flowers, soundlessly falling, lightly drifting flowers, though by the standards of the ghost world each petal would have weighed 100 weight, and their fall would have been like a crashing boulder. Then on the left and right of each of the forest avenues came youthful shapes, boys in one hand and girls on the other. If I could remember their singing and write down the notes, no man would read that score would ever grow sick or old. Between them went musicians, and after these a lady, in whose honour all this was being done. I cannot remember whether she was naked or clothed. If she was naked, then it must have been the almost visible penumbra of her courtesy and joy, which produced in my memory the illusion of a great shining train that followed her across the happy grass. If she were clothed, then the illusion of nakedness is doubtless due to the clarity with which her innermost spirit shone through the clothes. For clothes in that country are not a disguise. The spiritual body lives along each thread and turns them into living organs. A robe or a crown, is there as much of one wearer's features as a lip or an eye? But I have forgotten, and only partly do I remember the unbearable beauty of her face. Is it? I whispered to my guide. No, not at all, it's not Mary. This is someone you'll never have heard of. Her name on earth was Sarah Smith, and she lived in Golders Green. Well, she seems to be a person of particular importance. Aye, she is one of the great ones. Have you heard the fame in this country and fame on earth are two quite different things? And those who are gigantic people, look, they're like emeralds, who are dancing and throwing before her. Haven't you read Milton? 1,000 lived along angels lackey her. And all of these young men and women on each side, they are her sons and daughters. She must have been a very large family, sir. Every young man or boy that ever heard... Sorry, I'll start again. Every young man or boy that met her became her son, even if it was the only boy that brought the meat to her back door, and every girl that met her was her daughter. Isn't that a bit hard on their own parents? No, these are those that steal other people's children. But her motherhood was of a different kind. Those of whom it fell went back to their natural parents, loving them more. Few men looked on her without becoming, in a certain fashion, her lovers, but it was the kind of love that made them not less true, but truer to their own wives. Such was Penny and Brian's effect in many of us as teenagers as they led that youth group in Heathfield. It may or may not have been a significant time in Heathfield, but it's great in the economy of heaven. Also, as a parent now, I would really, from the bottom of my heart, like to thank Joe, Alistair, Becky and Chris, just for allowing your parents to share their lives with us as well. We're all the richer for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. We're going to hear via video from Rob and Marion White and Clive and Ruth Calver. It says something again about the humility of Brian, I think, that he just adored these people. Not that they're not worthy of being adored, but there was no kind of competition. These were leaders who he worked with at Spring Harvest and to other things, and he just absolutely loved them and had a huge impact on them. So we're going to hear from them, and then Isla and Helen are going to come and share some thoughts with us too.
Well, don't quite know what to say, but Brian and Penny have been friends since before we were all married, and well over 50 years, and it was great being such close friends. We had our children. Well, don't quite know what to say, but Brian and Penny have been friends since before we were all married, and well over 50 years, and it was great Well, don't quite know what to say, but Brian and Penny have been friends since before we were all married, and well over 50 years, and it was great being such close friends. We had our children similar times. We've both couples been through all kinds of ups and downs, but weathered it together. Penny and I lost our mums at similar times.
That's true.
And my lasting memory is of, well, don't quite.
We are giving you greetings from New York, in fact from Central Park. We are so sorry not to be with you to celebrate Brian today. What a special friend. We loved he and Penny so much and miss them greatly. May you really bring out all the stops in just celebrating a wonderful man who made a huge difference in our lives.
I suppose everyone has things that they're remembered for. And probably for Brian and Penny, the big memory outside.
We are giving you greetings from New York, in fact from Central Park. We are so sorry not to be with you to celebrate Brian today. What a special friend. We loved he and Penny so much and miss them greatly. May you really bring out all the stops in just celebrating a wonderful man who made a huge difference in our lives.
I suppose everyone has things that they're remembered for. And probably for Brian and Penny, the big memory outside of the family will be the tremendous work they did with that youth group as people grew older, learned to come and love Jesus, learned to grow in their love for Jesus and their service for him. Amazing what they did. But for Ruth and I, the big memory of Brian and Penny is not the youth group, it's the friendship. Because what the friendship meant and the joy of knowing them and sharing with them over the years was very special. We miss them both tremendously. And we wanted to pass our love to you and our blessings this special day as you commemorate a great man and the way that he and his wife were so used by God.
And To Alistair, Chris, Becky and Joe, you had an amazing parents. They taught you about hospitality, talked to you about being leaders and following Jesus. You carry the torch and make a difference in your lives, that your parents in glory are already rejoicing, but would rejoice even more. Thank you for your friendship and for your love too. God bless you. Bye-bye.
To say, but Brian and Penny have been friends since before we were all married, and well over 50 years, and it was great being such close friends. We had our children similar times. We've both couples been through all kinds of ups and downs, but weathered it together. Penny and I lost our mums at similar times.
That's true.
And my lasting memory is of having holidays in St Abbs, and the last holiday was really only 2 or 3 months before Penny died, and she was determined. We were on a walk and wanted to go up this fairly steep hill. Brian and Rob went back to the car, and so I was left thinking, I've got to do this. Actually, Penny did it so much better than me, and she was always very determined, full of fun, and Brian, very wise Brian, very steady, very solid, but great fun to be with, spiritual, and we miss them terribly.
We do. We really do miss them. And they were great friends. And I do realise that this is, a lot of this is about Brian's thanksgiving and remembrance, but also about both of them. But as Marion says, we were great friends. And then my sister Viv and her husband Tony, we often had the friendship together. In fact, we used to spend almost a couple of nights every New Year together, circulating round one another's houses, not at the same time, but in other years. And those were great times. And Brian, I particularly remember Brian affable. I like that word, affable. Friendly, wise, as Marion said, straightforward, always friendly to people, certainly loved God. They both loved God. And so we too as Christians were able to really share that with them, and with Viv and Tony as well. And so the memories are great. And I know this is a positive occasion of positive memories, but reality is that there are always some things, aren't there? And we used to quite enjoy it when we were together. If Brian and Penny had a bit of a disagreement, it was seeing who came out on top. Because we'd have disagreements in front of them as well. In terms of Brian and Penny, one has to say it was usually Penny that came out on top. But fair enough, maybe because Brian was the gentleman and actually said, no, it's okay. You can take the glory here. I don't know, but we had some great times together, and we hope that your time together is really good. I'm sorry we can't be there. We just got another engagement, but it's been great to be able to send these few thoughts. I don't know if Marion's got a final word or two.
No, I'll let you have the last word, but love to all the family there, and I hope you have a great time of remembering.
I've got the last word. Well, it is just goodbye, and again, hope that this is a good and a great time of remembrance and celebration. Thanks. Bye.
It's just been so lovely hearing all those wonderful memories, and for a family of which Isla and I are a part of, and very proud to be part of. It is just lovely hearing everyone's thoughts and words. Thank you. Sadly, there are a few people who couldn't be with us today, but who really wanted us to share some words, some memory of Brian. I'm going to start with Dominique's daughter, Sandrine. She apologises for her English, but it is definitely way better than my French. She starts, "The name of Brian is forever linked to the name of Penny,
Penny and Brian, Brian and Penny. My first English persons I discovered at the age of 11 years old. The generosity of these two humans being the kindness, curiosity and interest they had for the three young French girls who arrived in their lovely house in Mayfield, making us feel comfortable quickly. Jo, Becky, Alistair and Christopher, you were so cute. Even if English people had a reputation of bad cooking, I had the feeling that I was in the best restaurant in the world. Their house I remembered. I was very ashamed one time when Brian named me Little Piglet. It seems that I didn't eat my food normally. I was eating as if I hadn't eaten for 2 weeks. The food made by Penny was so good. But I also remember Brian looking at his belly with a little strange I translated this air as this: I'm not responsible for these kilos which came onto my belly. My wife is so good a cook. I later learned, when my English was a little better, that Brian had a big sense of humour. With him I discovered the English humour, which is saying funny things in a serious way. For me, Brian was a celebrity because every person in Mayfield seemed to know him well, and I was always so proud of walking near him in the street. I will finish by saying thank you, dear Brian, for all that you taught me during my stay in your house. I feel as if I was from your family, and it's a gift I will never forget. I know that is echoed by the rest of their family.
So some other people who couldn't be with us, but some little short messages from Gilly, who's not here today. I still miss your mum. I cycle past their old road in Hythe most nights and thank God for her. And I'm happy she's in a better place. She had such a great sense of humour too. She loved all of you children, a real lot, and always thought she could have done better as a mum, but always tongue-in-cheek. She used to have a hoot, laughing at how she used to cart you around to museums and long walks, which apparently none of you enjoyed. I have two teenage girls, and it makes me laugh thinking of your mum with you all, probably walking in the rain. Hope your dad's send-off is as special as he was, Gilly. And from Francis and Tina, we are so sorry we cannot be there with you today. Your mum and dad were an inspiration to us. We were so blessed to have them as friends at St Mark's and afterwards. They both have left big holes in so many lives, and our thoughts and prayers will be with you so much on Saturday. With our love and every blessing, Francis and Tina. And from Anne and Peter Hart, the last one on here, we have so many fond memories of both your mum and dad. We became very close friends. I find it hard to believe that they have both left this earth and are now with our Lord. We shall very much be thinking of you on the 18th of September, the same date that dear Penny went to be with the Lord in 2015. With our love and prayers, Anne and Peter Hart.
And I'm just going to finish with a message from Viv and her late husband Tony, actually written on the occasion of Brian's 80th birthday. When we first met Brian, when he was a youth leader at Banstead Baptist Church, what a smart and handsome young man he was, and we were all delighted to have him as our youth leader. However, I guess a few of the girls' hopes were dashed when Brian's eye fell upon Penny, and it was soon very clear he was greatly enamoured by her. I still recall the smart outfit he bought for her on their engagement, an attractive navy blue suit with a possibly pink hat. The hat was essential, whether she liked it or not, as she was now the fiancée of a youth leader. We had so much fun with Brian and Penny over so many years. As engaged couples together, we spent a day helping them paint their first home. As young marrieds and highly impressed with their hospitality in their new home, the dinner service, the canteen of cutlery, and our first introduction to Penny's wonderful cooking. Then the children followed with Penny and me in close competition as to whose baby would appear first. Tom, our son, beat Joanna by a couple of days. What a couple Brian and Penny were through all those years, not only bringing up a gorgeous family who still remained so close to each other, but also opening their home to other youngsters who needed somewhere to live and be loved, and at the same time running the youth group and caring for each of those teenagers as well. Wherever they have lived over the years, whichever church they've attended, they were always closely involved with that church, leading and serving in various ways. Brian particularly always had a strong desire to help others to know and follow the Lord through preaching and Bible studies. He still, right up until the end, had a passion to see churches grow strong and vibrant. We have seen Brian and Penny go through hard times of suffering, most recently, of course, for Brian, when he lost his dearest love and companion. We saw Brian struggle to understand why these things have happened, but he still turned his hand to administer and help wherever it was needed, whether at church or in the family.
Shall we stand for our final song?
I see the stars, I hear the mighty thunder, thy power throughout the universe display. Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. When through the woods and forest glades I wander, and hear the birds sing sweetly in the trees. When I look down from lofty mountain grandeur, and hear the birds and feel the gentle breeze, then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. And when I think that God His Son not sparing sent Him to die, I scarce can take it in, that on the cross my burden gladly bearing, He bled and died to take away my sin. Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How bride shall come with shout of acclamation and take me home. What joy shall fill my heart? Then shall I bow with humble adoration and there proclaim, oh my God, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art.
We're nearly finished. Just going to have one reading. Just take a moment to look at that picture. He could be really daft, Brian, couldn't he? Let's not forget that. I think four of the grandchildren are going to come and read to us from 2 Corinthians. So if you'd like to come up and do that. Dan, thank you for welcoming us and letting us use the church today. And Dan's going to close for us. But let's listen to these profound and beautiful words together.
So we're not giving up. How could we? Even though on the outside it often looks like things are falling apart on us, on the inside, where God is making a new life, not a day goes by without his unfolding grace.
These hard times are small potatoes compared to the coming good times. The lavish celebration prepared for us. There's far more here than meets the eye. The things we see now are here today, gone tomorrow. But the things we can't see now will last forever.
For instance, we know that when these bodies of ours are taken down like tents and folded away, they will be replaced by resurrection bodies in heaven, God-made, not handmade, and we'll never have to relocate our tents again. Sometimes we can hardly wait to move, and so we cry out in frustration.
Compared to what's coming, living conditions around here seem like a stopover in an unfurnished shack, and we're tired of it. We've been given a glimpse of the real thing, our true home, our resurrection bodies. The Spirit of God whets our appetites by giving us a taste of what's ahead. He's put a little of heaven in our hearts so that we'll never settle for less.
Let's pray. Father, thank you. Thank you that you are here by your Spirit. Thank you for your faithfulness. And we thank you that Brian has gone before us to be with you, to dwell with you, as he did when he walked here among us. We thank you, Lord, for the example. And we thank you for these treasured memories we've been able to share today. So many others will share over cream tea. So many others will take with us. But Lord, we thank you most of all that you are with us. You comfort us in our grief. You guide our paths. You lead us closer and closer to that eternal home. We bless and praise you. We want to give you all the glory for the love of Jesus that we've seen in Brian and that we've been able to share and enjoy today. Bless you, Father. Thank you for your love. Thank you that you're with us. Thank you for your goodness. This is all to the glory of Jesus' name. And now, as we heard earlier, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you peace, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. kind of final word from the grandchildren. I will say there's more parking here, if you could leave the car here, ideally. What's that? Okay. So the place to go is 36 Henwood Green Road for the cream tea, and it's about a 10-minute walk. So, but there is a final word from grandchildren.
So Grace, what do you think of when you think of Grandad?
Well, first of all, I think about being in the dining room in Sarrett and standing on his shoes for about 20 minutes whilst we're dancing around in the dining room whilst Grandma was cooking, or I don't know, doing something useful. And we would just be dancing around. He'll be doing, it wouldn't be to any music, but he would be like going dum 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 dum.
Yeah.
And be holding me up, and I'd be standing on his feet, and I'd be dancing around the living room. And he always had shoes on. I don't know if he had like indoor shoes, but like he always had proper shoes on.
Yeah, he had. Yeah.
It was sort of a sock on sock action. It was always like.
Yeah, I think he did have indoor shoes.
Yeah, he did. He used to change into his indoor shoes.
Because then, don't you remember that Christmas when you went on that walk and it was really muddy, and he wore those indoor shoes and he fell over because of wearing the wrong shoes?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
When he used to be able to pick us up when we were small, we used to stand on his feet, and then he'd stand on his hands, and then he'd like lift us up. And I used to get him to do it over and over and over and over again. But yeah, I remember that. That was cute.
That's when you realised you were an adrenaline junkie.
Yeah.
I remember him always doing Chinese burns. Yeah.
Oh,
anyone else remember that?
They were awful.
Weren't they?
Awful. And his hand squeezes.
Yeah, his hand.
My poor hand. That's so true. He squeezed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you actually felt like your bones like move over. I was like, get off!
When he used to like walk past you and pretend to like with his hand crack an egg, crack an egg on your head.
Yeah.
Bless him.
Well, when I was little, he'd have so much patience. Like I don't know where he got it from or why he had it, but he would spend hours with me playing with my dollies in the garden and carrying everything for me. And there's a photo of him just carrying all my dolly stuff with like stuff, and it was just hilarious.
Oh. I think he secretly loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably when he came over for like a Tuesday night or evening to have dinner, and we would normally go out in the garden and play some table tennis on the table.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, that was fun with him.
That's really cool.
Who would win?
Me, obviously.
Obviously. Of course.
Obviously.
I think one of my biggest memories of him is with his with the train set, with the Hornby set. There were so many times when I used to ask him to get it out. He only got it out a couple of times. And one of the times when I think the first time I was really wanting to play with it and just go mad with it basically. And he was like, no, we have to do it properly. And every time the trains went a bit too fast, maybe slow them down.
I just thought of another one that reminded me of another one. I don't know if anyone else did it, but when me and Jake used to go to Grandma and Grandad's for like the weekend or whatever, I'd always go on his computer like in the conservatory and like write a poem and like go on Microsoft Word and like do those cool like borders around the outside and like change the font. And I used to think I was like living my best life, like doing like Comic Sans and like the funky swirly ones.
He taught me how to take paracetamol tablets.
Vital.
Very important.
Great life lesson.
Into 8 pieces so that I could swallow it, and now I can actually take 2 tablets at once, and that's all.
Drugs.
Show us. Yeah. Taught me that potatoes grow underground and how to dig them up as well at their allotment in High.
Yeah. I remember he used to always randomly come up here with different vegetables. He'd just turn up at like 2 in the afternoon, just bringing up a bit of rhubarb or a bit of sweet corn.
Why was there always so much rhubarb?
Something that this is a more recent memory, and it means that like so much to me, this does. But remember when it was his 80th and we all went away for the weekend or something in that nice house?
Oh, massive.
And we were all sat on the dining table one evening, and Ed was sat next to Grandad. And also, he had also started kind of losing some of his memories and stuff like that. And at one point, we were just chatting with him, and he just sort of turned to Ed and held his hand out and just gave Ed a handshake and just said, "You're so welcome in this family." And it was like, it's like really makes me well up, because especially because Ed never met Grandma as well. And it was like, he was just saying like, yeah, you're part of the family, which is why I'm stuck with him now. So
on that walk on Boxing Day, where like after he fell over, he held my hand so tight the whole way home that like all the way down to my DL, like he was gripping on. Like it wasn't like he was holding me to make sure I didn't fall. It was like I was properly being like, oh, like don't fall again. And then we were like just around the corner from Ali and Helen's, and it was quite painful because he was walking so slowly. And I remember Mum being like, oh, come on, Dad, like hurry up a little bit. And he went, oh, Becky, it's my knees. And then he looked at me and he went, oh, any old excuse will do these days. I remember being like, oh, it's all a lie. It's saying to us.
That's amazing.
But it was really good.
That's hilarious.
he knew what he was doing the whole time.
I had bad knees.
He would always say to everyone, like, I don't know, you could just be smiling at him or something, and he'd just go, don't look at me with that tone of voice.
With that tone of voice, yeah.
He used to come over every Tuesday night. He would always come over. I'm not sure he knew who I was. He never did remember. He once called me Nicola.
Great person.
Yeah. And every time he would come through the door, he would shake my hand and he would say good morning or something completely irrelevant, and he would come in and greet everyone. And then when he was leaving, he'd say, nice to see you. Every time we'd have to say,
be nice.
Oh, every time. And it was just something that we did, and it was just so lovely.
That's really cool.
Yeah, we were lucky to have that, because we had that he stayed with us the weekend, because he passed away on the Tuesday, and he stayed with us the weekend before that.
Yeah.
Him just being there the entire time. We had like a roast dinner, and it was just really lovely, and he was just like laughing at himself most of the time. It was quite funny.
Yeah.
He still owes me £10.
You don't have to say this, but I don't think you're getting it back.
I think that's a nice lot of memories.
Yeah, I think so. He was great. He was great. We're very lucky, I think, to have had him as a granddad.
Yeah. Definitely.
Definitely.
I do think one of his most consistent things, though, was his accent that he did.
His Indian
His Indian accent.
Hello! Can you believe what they're doing?
Whenever he got in like trouble with something on Mum, he'd always apologise in that accent.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, there's a photo from when I think it was his 50th, and I thought he was Indian.
No.
Indian. Granddad. Crazy.
I think that's a nice place to end it.
Yeah.
Can we stop recording now? Okay, how do I do that? Oh, I don't know. Well, thank you very much, everyone.
Stop.
Stop.